And hello, everyone. And so don't hesitate to ask those questions as well. We good?
Yes.
Okay, he's gonna first start with his full name.
All Zdunek.
Yeah.
Got that right.
I'm gonna get it.
Practice it at the end altogether, yes.
Yeah, so we will, yes, we're gonna spend some time at the end practicing because I love to learn people's names. Like I said, we have some preset kind of questions to get started, but then feel free on the online audience, the digital audience, in the audience, which are all on one side, to ask questions as well. Cool. Okay. So how about this? Can you just share a little bit about who you are and your career journey?
So thank you for having me today. Thanks for coming. I know that you're stressed out about tests. I see tests going on all over campus today, and so I know that I'll have nightmares tonight. That I have a test and I didn't show up to class for the entire semester. You know that nightmare. And it's French class of all things. So yeah. So you're talking about nonlinear path. I mean, I really feel like I'm a professional mutt. And I used to feel ashamed about that, actually. Just before I came here, I had a coffee with one of the professors, Jay Craig, who's an economics and finance professor. And he was actually the one coming, and we'll get to Drucker in a little bit, but you know, it did make me feel like a mutt. And so really looking back, I started, well, all the way back when I was a kid, which actually does make sense later on in the conversation, but I grew up in East Baltimore in Maryland, East Coast, and I was a latchkey kid, which meant I came home every day and didn't have anyone there, and I had to take care of myself. I was just looking at statistics. I think there were 40% latchkey kids back when I was growing up, and I think now there are 20%. So it's getting better, but still a lot of latchkey kids coming home alone. And so you just have to figure stuff out. And, a lot of my learning actually I did through Warner Brothers cartoons. And Wile E. Coyote in particular, who was always trying to chase the Roadrunner. I never got it, but always trying to chase his dream, chase his goal of killing that Roadrunner. And it didn't matter what happened, whether he fell off a cliff or a huge anvil got slammed onto him or he blew up. He always came back in the next spring and started his journey again. So if nothing else, I think that's what has driven me, or sort of my hope that I always hung on to, which is there's always the next spring. Life goes on. But I was getting into trouble as again having a lot of time on my hands. I was smoking and drinking, and we were shoplifting for the fun of it every Friday night. We'd get together as a gang and just go pick stuff out of shops just to see if we could do it. Not that we needed it or anything, but then they came up with the Sensormatics. That's when we decided then, okay, we're not going to do that anymore. And we of course didn't know how much damage we were doing to shop owners and things, but it was a thing to do. But then a guy started a boy choir when I was about 12 or so, and that's really what changed my path. He got us this ragtag singing and doing music, and then showed us downtown, which was like a mile away from my house, but I didn't even know there was a downtown because I hadn't been out and about. And so he showed me this whole world, and I thought, well, that's what I want to do. I want to be that person who shows everybody else, that mentor. And so I got into music. I started me in piano lessons, and I took piano lessons, and I'm like, okay, well, I want to be a musician. So, and I want to be like him, so I want to be a conductor. I mean, this is how, there were no counselors then to say, look, you can't do that, or you shouldn't be doing that, or why don't you consider this? And so I just wandered into it and wound up going to school for it. Then I did conducting professionally for about 15 years, conducting choruses, orchestras, and as a kid, aside from the drinking, the shoplifting and so forth, I also was very entrepreneurial, always trying to make a dollar. I was selling fried dough out of my mother's kitchen and destroying it in the meantime. I made $12 that day, though, which today is $60. I found out that's a lot for a 10-year-old, right, in one day. I also found a photo of mine recently. I was going through my mother's thing. I painted my face as a clown, and then I took 10 of these and I painted my face as a face of a clown. And I went around trying to sell these in the neighborhood for $1. That did not work out. That was probably one of my worst ventures. Yeah, I can share, you can pass that
Yeah.
around if you want. But I was trying to make it valid. But my mother didn't really support that because, you know, I was getting into too much trouble and destroying her kitchen in the meantime, so. I tell that story because after conducting, I was conducting for, like I said, 15 years, and I had this itch to do something else, like that wasn't enough. And I was interested in finance, I was interested in the operations of the organizations I was working with, I was interested in marketing. And so I thought, you know, you can't be unfocused, especially at that point in my career. And I took a pause and decided to figure out, you know, why is this distracting me? Why is this business part of me distracting me? And realize, you know, that entrepreneurial kid came back out again, who should have been fostered all along, but was suppressed kind of, and took another path. So, long story short, I spent a couple of years doing some networking and talking to people that I knew, and wound up being able to make a lateral move into working in the architectural stone business, because the CEO said, look, you work with all these musician egos, you can just work with my architect guys. They've got so many egos, and our salespeople don't want to deal with them, so you deal with them. So I spent the last couple of years just going around the country working on with architects, and then got back into the music business on the management side. And that's when I really locked in, because the organization I was working with, I didn't know it at the time, was failing. I didn't know until I got in there for about a month or two and looked at their finances in depth. And when I found out they were failing, they had just done a Save the Orchestra campaign 6 months before I came, so we couldn't do another Save the Orchestra because it's just happened. So I had to figure out how to turn the organization around internally, while externally making it feel like everything was fine and we were moving forward. So a lot of creative ways to do that, which we can talk about later if you want. But that sort of turnaround really got me going, and really I felt for the first time that sort of the career jacket fit. And there are reasons for that. We can talk about it a little later. But so I did that as a turnaround for an orchestra, and then the theater, state theater, was going under, and they asked if I'd help with that. And then I did some other consulting, and then I came down to Los Angeles because the major orchestra here was failing. And then did that successfully. Then I turned around a hotel, and then I went into consulting with a boutique company and worked with BDO in consulting. And now, you know, after a number of years and going back internally, and now I'm chief operating officer for an accounting and business management firm, Miller Kaplan, that actually has specialty in the entertainment business. So I'm still back to entertainment in some form, but really doing the operations, finance, marketing, human resources, leadership development, you know, overseeing all of those departments, and still in sort of change management mode. So it's a good fit, and I'm doing consulting as I want to now, here and there. So that's sort of the life journey.
Wow, that's pretty remarkable. What do you think? Yeah, how about that online audience? Any questions? Okay, we're gonna move on. I was also a latchkey kid, so I totally resonated with that, and I did watch the same cartoons. And especially on Saturday morning, that was our time, after school and on Saturdays, so I appreciate that. I think one of the things as I was listening, Paul, is just kind of, you know, getting that idea how there was fear, there's probably some internal fear, but you were just like, I'm gonna do it, like, right? I have to keep moving forward because there's something that's pulling you to go back to selling the picture or selling, you know, the dough and so on. There's things that we learn in life, and then there's things that are embedded in our veins, right? And that's one of the things that's in you.
Right.
You're born with it no matter how you look. So, and I do appreciate the analogy of being like the career mud, because I think a lot of times we shame ourselves for wanting to change and why we need to change. And so I always like to break it down very frivolously in some ways. It's just like, if you think about the way that you designed your hair 10 years ago or 15 years ago, what you did with it and how you've changed it now, right? And you're like, wow, I can't believe I wore my hair like that. And so I think about even like the 80s, the way I wore my hair and how I wear it now. You know, the amount of hairspray I put in it was probably so toxic and dangerous, that I would have stuck to anything, right? So you think about that. Did you?
There's.
Oh, great.
When you.
Yeah, let's,
Madison.
oh, I cannot. Okay, go ahead, Madison.
Hi, can you hear me? And am I yelling?
No, you're good.
Okay, I know it can be kind of hard on these hybrid environments. Hi, Paul, nice to meet you. Thanks for being here. I wanted to ask you a question around change. I know there was a lot of change in your career and you do change management as a consultant. So I'm wondering what advice you have for all of us here around how to best embrace change in your professional life and the uncertainty that can come.
Madison, you must have read our questions ahead of time.
Next.
That was one of the next ones.
And I think that's a great question, and so first of all, change, I know you say, what's the only thing that constant is change, right? That is really true, that saying that nothing stays the same. What's great about it from a career standpoint though now, compared to when I was growing up, or even in the last 10 years, I think in the last 5 or 6 years in particular, companies, and they still have a long way to go, but companies are being more open-minded about what you've done in the past. It used to be that you had to have this linear path, because if someone looked at your resume or you told them your story, like if it didn't make sense to them from a linear perspective, they thought you were, unfocused or just wandering. And that's not the case anymore, which is great for you guys in particular. That gives you an advantage. And so it's really about what value do you bring to whatever you're applying for, and how does your experience and your life journey, we were talking about that a little bit earlier, not just career experience, but your life experience, what you did as a kid, what you're interested in, what your hobbies are, what you're good at outside of your technical skills, all play into what's valuable for a company. And so I think that, and I don't know if this is your question, but having done a couple of career pivots, it's really about building on what you've done so far and leveraging that for what's next, right? So I know we're going to talk about this, but how do you go from conducting to business, from the podium to the boardroom, so to speak, or practice room to the boardroom? And it's I had to sit and really think about, okay, because I didn't want to go back to school at that time. I at that point, as musicians, you're practicing your craft for many, many years, not just when you get to college. I mean, when you get to college, you've already put in probably 10, 12, 15 years before that. And so by the time I was thinking about making a choice, it was 30 years of studying and my craft and all the money that goes into it. I was thinking about my mother, what's she gonna say? She wasted all this time and money on me. I wasted all this time and money on me. But it's really sitting down and thinking, okay, how can I take what I've learned? What are the things that make me a good conductor? And I was saying, I'm sorry, I forgot her name. Yes, yeah. Earlier that we were talking about that I use this still today in leadership, which is working with people without talking to them, like watching what they need. So if you have 80 people in front of you and you have to react in real time, you have to see who needs you, even if it's all the way in the corner there. And what do they need from you? So learning that sort of communication, people skills, and being able to support, and I still use today. So I know it's a long answer to your question, but I don't know if I even answered it, but I think it's really about, building on your past and what are your assets? What are your resources that you can leverage for the next thing?
Great, thank you.
Yeah, Madison, we'll expand on it too. Sorry about that. Okay, so question 2 kind of alluded to your question, Madison, but like, how did you go from conducting orchestras to being a chief executive? For example, how are they connected, the two? And you kind of talked about it. And how did your time at the Drucker School of Management influence your journey?
So we kind of touched on a little bit of all that, but so I was thinking, okay, I don't want to go back to school. I don't have time or money to go back to school. I can't go backwards in salary, or I didn't want to go backwards in salary. So how do I make this pivot, this lateral move? And so truly what I did and what I mentor everybody today sounds really simple, but it's worked. And every time I've made a shift, and every time that I've talked to someone who's either entering the workforce or is making a career shift, is truly sitting down and listing, what is your driver? And driver is deeper than just what you're passionate about, what you believe in. It's actually I wrote about it in a book that's out now, but I'm actually working on another book that goes deeper into this, which is why I told the whole childhood story and took a long time talking about it. Is that I really believe that, and I've talked to many students and mentees and other professionals, that those who are successful have really locked into what their driver is. And their driver, their defining driver, as I like to call it, is really something that was formed when you were younger. It was a stressor of yours. And not to go dark here, but my stressor was that I saw my mother getting beaten when I was a kid, when I was 3 years old. And I also was a victim of child abuse, both by the Boy Scouts and the Catholic Church, two that are in the news today. And my driver, which is really supporting those who need help, who can't help themselves, right? So that's why when I said that the code finally fit, is when I got to a turnaround situation that I didn't even know I was walking into. It's like, wow, this is awesome, because now I can take all of my energy and put it into this organization that really needs my help and helping it, right? So again, I know that's dark. I actually have another story, which was probably just as dark, but an insurance executive was in a car accident with her mother, and her mother died next to her. She's now an insurance executive because her driver was creating a safe place for people, creating safety. So she's in the insurance business to make sure that people are safe and don't have that tragedy again. Another executive who was a VP of an engineering company, he had food scarcity when he was growing up. They were always rationing their food. Not as tragic, but tragic enough. And his driver is to support, to make sure there's enough resources to feed his friends, his family, and his team. That's why he doesn't want to be a CEO. He wants to be in that support role of VP, so that he can provide resources to everyone. And I say that because I've met a lot of CEOs and a lot of owners who have taken over a business or wandered into their career, and something's not right. Like their passion, their driver's not fitting what they do. And that's where I usually start. Like, what's your driver? I talk about this, and they're like, my driver is this, but you're doing this over here. And you can see a direct correlation to the flatlining of their business because their passion, their driver is not what they're doing. And so sitting down and figuring that list out, I know it's a long answer to the first list. The second list is, what are you, I call it, what's your superest power? Like, what do you do better than anybody else? And it doesn't have to be a technical thing. It could be, like mine is, when I was a kid, I used to walk up and down neighborhoods when we had row houses, and they had steps outside. And before the internet, people actually sat outside and talked to each other, even when there was TV. So I'd go up and down and talk to people, find out who they were, what's interested them. And so my superest power, I feel, is convincing people and talking to people and understand how to meet them where they are and bring them along. And that's how I also work in turnarounds, because I don't just come in and say, this is what you need to do. I try to figure out where they are and bring them along, and then have it be their idea based on my getting to know them. So you take those two things, and then you figure out, what can you do with that, right? How can you make money at that, which is the third bucket. That's your sort of, to me, that's your purpose in life, these two things, what your driver and what your superest power is. But then how you can make money at it is sort of that trifecta of then, and when you sit down, it's not like, I want to be X. You figure out what these two buckets are first, your driver and your superpower, and then figure out, okay, now what can I do? And what's also great about today is that there's so many different jobs, so many different titles. There isn't just your regular 10 positions at a company. There's so many creative, chief fun officer nowadays, right? That was the most fun one I heard lately, chief fun officer. Who grows up saying I want to be a chief fun officer, right? But there's a job like that. So anyway, so that's, I don't know, that was it. So, and then Drucker was what I said earlier, which is I came here and, the openness of, look, we don't care that you didn't have a linear background, but these are all the things that you can bring. Here's how you can leverage those things. Like I said, Jay Prague is one, and Bernie Jaworski, another one who also sort of opened my eyes to say, look, the whole world's out there. If you have these assets and your resources and where you've been, figure out how to make money at that. And that opened me to thinking much broader, not within an industry, not within a geographic, not within a level or a title, just, and now with LinkedIn and other social job sites, you can spend days just looking at openings and possibilities. And then lastly, I'll just say, and just kind of being naive enough, which is where we started today, just being naive enough to say, yes, I can do it. Anything's possible. Because once you say it's impossible, then you put your own wall up.
I appreciate that. I think that, a couple things, and what you had said at the end is, one negative thought can saturate 20 positive thoughts in a second. And so you've got to
And
be
it's
able.
louder than the other one.
Exactly.
That's the scary part.
Yeah, you have to pull out of that because then you'll never get to that place of finding that what's driving you.
And that goes back to Wile E. Coyote, right? If he got
Yeah.
upset that an anvil got
Yeah.
dropped on him, that cartoon would be over.
Yeah.
Forever.
Yeah, but he kept getting up and brushing off, and I think sometimes if you put yourself in a vulnerable spot to be there, but why are we here then? Right, so that, I appreciate that.
And if you're interviewing for a company who doesn't get that, then you probably don't want to be there.
Exactly.
Because they don't have the openness and the vision to see what you can bring to them.
Yep. That's what I say, yeah, that's what I say to all of you. You're interviewing them more than they're interviewing you, and that is so true. How are we doing online? Any questions? Okay.
Everyone's asleep.
No, they're not asleep. They're just so excited that you're here. I know you all are missing out on chocolate. Just a reminder there that you can come in anytime and pick them up. Yeah. Okay, so and I guess Madison, again, you must have been on our list of questions, but what advice would you give to those who are about to graduate, contemplating a career pivot, and how would you navigate those transitions?
It's really the answer we talked with Madison, and again, it sounds really simple to make those lists. But if you make the list without, again, trying to tie it to anything and just really looking at what could this be? How could I make that a career or make that a job? And nowadays, post-COVID, which was a horrible experience for all of us, but I think the silver linings out of COVID were, again, putting up barriers, right? One barrier was we had to fly to New York we had to take 5 hours to fly to New York for a 30-minute meeting and then fly back again. Well, now we don't, right? Now that barrier has been shattered. The other barrier is that you have to work for a company, right? Now there's so many, I forget what the statistic is, but so many who have started their own companies since COVID, right? They've started, they founded a new company. So that's a possibility too. So, again, sitting down and figuring out how you can use your resources, where you've been, even where you were as a kid, what things did you do, what things you spend your time on, and how can you use that and pivot into a new anything.
Great. Any questions, Matt? I know you all are tired. I do want to be cognizant that we're right in the middle of midterms, so you're feeling it. But just ask questions. Yeah, Nancy.
So, if in case we are about to graduate and as you have seen, in your life journey, your choices change, but then there's always someone who impacts you. You take influence from different, maybe teachers, mentors, and you start changing your destination, your goals every semester. But does it mean you're not focused, or does it mean you are ready to do something big? And where do you end up with? How do you make the most of all that motivation factors? And how much when you graduate, do you stay in touch with your university? How much does that matter?
That's a great question and something I didn't touch on, but I think is,
For the audience.
so I'll make the question shorter. So it's when you've talked to all these people, all these mentors or resources and you know, if you're changing your passions, you're changing your direction, you're changing your mind, depending on who you talk to last. You know, how does that work? And should you stay in touch with those people, the university, whoever else? And I think that's an absolutely fabulous question because, and I answer in a number of different ways. One is the other thing that you're, and this goes to your question as well, Michelle, about pivoting. You can't do it on your own. Like, so you figured the stuff out that I just talked about. You need to have that person on the other side to say, well, that's, yeah, I value that, or I need that, right? So I think it's fantastic that you talk to as many people as you can. And it doesn't matter that they're in this, again, same industry, same area that you're in. As a matter of fact, I even would say, you know, if you're fascinated by something or fascinated by someone you meet, go talk to them about their life. And because you may, really what you're trying to do is gather all this data and all this information and figure out how you're going to sort it out later, right? Don't worry about, again, even listening and figuring out information in a linear way. And I've done all kinds of weird stuff. Like I had a friend who was the county coroner, head county coroner in Minnesota. And I asked her if I could go see an autopsy that she was doing. I don't think that was even legal, but she got me in and I saw an autopsy. And I saw an autopsy of this guy who was like 55 and he was on a bike and he just fell over the side of the road and he died. So they didn't know actually why he died. Did he die before he fell? Did he die because he fell? Did he get hit? So they had to do a full body autopsy and it was fascinating. What was I doing? I was a musician, I was conducting, but I wanted to go see this autopsy. Had nothing to do with classical music or anything I was doing. And yet it was a pivotal moment, right? And in many ways. And so I think that, you know, talking, and that's what I did even when I was going through that sort of transition is, here's what I think I want to do, here's what I think I'm good at, here's I've done my homework on this side, and then you go test it, you know, and say, okay, what you're telling me, yeah, that kind of resonates, or I thought I was going to do that, but that stuff doesn't sound really fun. So really what you're doing is listening to information and figuring out what you want to do. Like you said, you're interviewing them as well. So and you should also develop your network, stay in touch with your network before you need it, not when you need it. Because when you need it is not okay, right? If you're going to call me, and by the way, anyone here, I'm on LinkedIn, we can get you information. I'm happy to talk to you, you know, give you advice, mentor, but don't do it like when you need it or if you need something from me to get a job, for instance, or whatever. A lot of people don't want to meet with you if you feel like you just want a job and not really truly interested in what they're doing, right? So informational interviews or coffees or times where you just want to know what they do and you don't want anything in return, that's the best because people love to talk about themselves. It gives them a high, like sort of dopamine high, and you get all this information and you don't need anything. So it's a great time to do it. You know, I know we have actually an arts executive on the call. He's a friend of mine from many years ago. We worked together. A lot of CEOs will, like with the Hollywood strike that we just talked about. I would bet that most of those CEOs have not been at the table with those workers until now, right? They don't go on set and talk to people and get to know them and figure out what's going on. They only come together when they have to make a deal. And that's not the time you can start a relationship. So same thing with when you need a job. That's not when you can start a relationship.
I think that Paul's been reading my mind, or I've been reading his mind over all these years because I say the same thing. So when I can't have a counseling session, I'll make sure that you can chime in for me instead. But it is true. You all have your own personal board of directors and you need to stay in touch with them year round. And you don't reach out to them just when something good or something bad happens. You just have an organic relationship, an authentic relationship with them.
It's like friendships, right?
It's like friendship.
You don't want a friend reaching out to you just when they need something, right? You just want to hang out with them. That's
exactly
a
right.
friend. Right? It's the
Yeah.
same thing in business, but sometimes we think it's so different. It's a different world. It's not. We're just human beings put in these different scenarios. but we're the same human beings and the same needs we have, no matter what relationships we're in.
It's also showing respect. I just, hey, how are you doing? I haven't talked to you in a while. How's it going? You're not asking for something. But when you do get to that space, it's okay. It's not okay if that's the only conversation you're having. So, thank you. How are we doing online? Okay, fantastic. So right now we're at about, I think 35 after. I have an old like real watch.
The clock here is still a quarter out.
Yeah, the clock says, yeah. The clock says not about 9:47. It's 12:38 though, so we're doing fantastic. Okay, so I threw an extra question in that he hasn't seen. No, just kidding. I'm only joking. So what do you look for in a job applicant, right? And possibly in your own team?
Yeah, I think this is very important, and I actually do use this for my own personal friends and for just hired somebody, as a matter of fact, who has this. What I call the 3 C's. One is curiosity. You have to have curiosity. Like, you guys already passed the test because you're here, right? You're curious about what the heck's going on here. So having curiosity, again, about things that you may not know anything about, but wanting to know how to solve that problem that's not solvable, or understand that person's career, understand that person's interest. So curiosity, I think, you have to be successful. The second thing is creativity, a creative approach to problem solving, to figuring out your life, to figure out, okay, here's where I am, I want to be over here, how am I going to get there? And not waiting for somebody else to figure that out, but trying to figure out creative ways to get there. Just like, again, Wile E. Coyote did, right? He figured creative ways to try to catch the roadrunner. Keep going back to that, it's very more impactful than I think it was.
Yeah.
It's like, you know,
I watched.
but he's trying all kinds of things to catch that roadrunner, right? Creative. And then it's fine if you're curious, and it's fine if you're creative, and I know a lot of people are both of those. But it doesn't mean anything, or you're not going to get anywhere unless you've got commitment to really get things done, to execute on what that is. A lot of people have a lot of ideas, very curious, very creative, but they don't actually deliver on them, right? Or they deliver on things, but they're not really curious or creative, so they haven't really figured out the best solution to it. So if you can have those 3 things, and I just hired an office manager just a couple weeks ago, and he's got those 3 things. He's creative. We were talking in our first interview and about a problem. It was an IT problem, but that's not his role. And the next interview, when I brought him back with the rest of the team, he's like, you know, I'm thinking about that IT problem. Here's some things that I think we can solve for. Like, that wasn't his job to do. It wasn't even his to follow up on. It's not going to be his job in the future. But he was curious enough about, there was this problem, how could he fix it? And if I would have said, sure, go do it, he would go and get it done. Right. So that's the kind of team I think you want. And to me, that's the kind of friends you want to have, you know, relationships you want to have, or those people who are curious, creative, and committed to seeing things through.
Yeah, and it also, you know, from what you said, it also means that the office manager is really vested in the company. He's not just focused on his own position. He's now thinking, we all have to kind of work together to make all of this connect together to make it work. And so, fantastic, thank you. How are we doing on our online? We're good.
Still asleep.
No, they're not asleep. They're so intrigued. So with all the turnarounds you did, was there a common theme to the problems and solutions? Yes, it's Wile E. Coyote. So we'll just skip over that one.
Now the common turnaround. So I've done, as I said, I started with an orchestra, then went to a theater. I've done a hotel. I've worked with a defense company. Worked with a gun manufacturing company. I worked with a plastic surgeon. I've worked with a private school. And everything in between.
Fashion, right? There was fashion or makeup or, you know, things like that.
Nonprofits, for-profits, all kinds of sizes, all kinds of lengths of being in business, from startups all the way to 80-year plus organizations. And the common themes are 3 of them. One is, you know, what is your purpose? What differentiates you from everything else? And that's all. This is also true personally. This goes back to your driver. Your driver is your differentiator. But for a company, you know, like I was working with a winery up in Napa, and I said, you know, what's your differentiator? I mean, there are thousands and tens and hundreds of thousands of wineries and wines out there. What's your differentiator? What makes you so special? And he leaned in, he was the winemaker, he said, because we make excellent wine. Like, that's not a differentiator, right? That's what you expect, especially if you're paying X price. Like, that's not a differentiator, that's a given. And how do you cut through an industry like the wine industry with that differentiator? What's funny is that he and his company actually did have a differentiator, which is the way they process the wine didn't give people rosacea. So a lot of people can't drink red wine because they break out, sort of red blotches. He was able to make it such that people who had that and couldn't drink red wine could actually drink red wine. But what he was doing is he was sharing that with his competition. I'm like, stop doing that and focus on marketing if this is your differentiator. So finding out what your differentiator is, because you know you're in a global market nowadays, right? With the internet, people don't know if you're 2 people in a basement or you're 10 million people globally. And especially with our sophisticated AI and our sophisticated branding, people don't know. So the customer goes online, they don't know how big or small or whatever. So your competition is everyone now, and not even your same industry. So the second thing is the people, right? We talked about that a lot, having the right people, because usually when I go into companies, it's not what they do, what they produce, even nonprofits, what their mission or what they're trying to accomplish. It's the people that they have trying to do it. They're not the ones who are team players, right? They're not the ones who can be curious, creative, and committed. That's usually what the problem is, the people. So really, and that's, going back to Drucker and why I came to Drucker is because I really do believe there is a balance of what the industry or what your company is trying to do from a technical and manufacturing or product side. But then equally, you have to take care of the people. And so many, even still to this day, I'll say that so many CEOs and board members feel like this is all soft stuff. Like the people, come on, we'll just get some more people, different people. And it's not, you've really got to spend as much, if not more time on the people, having the right people, because then they can produce the widgets. The widgets are easier than finding the right people. And then the last thing is really what kind of culture do you have? What's your place like? Is it bright? Is it airy? Is it dark and siloed with cubicles? And so what kind of atmosphere and culture are you creating? So if you work on those 3 foundational things, I think you can pile anything on top of it. And usually, to your question, those are the 3 things, or usually those 3 things are broken in all those industries that I mentioned. And it sounds like, okay, well, that's kind of bluff, right? Like, because I'll have CEOs say, well, just come to fix the finance. We need more money. We need better money. We need whatever. It's like, you can't fix the finance until you fix these things that are just talking about. Because if you're not differentiated, who's going to buy your product, right? Because you're just a commodity. If you don't have the right people producing or running your company or moving it forward, being a we instead of a me, you're going to flatline. And if you have all that, but you have a really toxic culture that doesn't get rid of those people who are toxic or isn't really, thanking and figuring out how to reward your people, you're eventually going to flatline as well. So those things actually do drive up the dollar and drive up your net results. But a lot of people don't want to hear that, especially engineers and finance people.
Well, and I agree. I think that
Nothing against engineers. and
No,
finance
yeah,
people.
of course
People
not.
part of this.
if you're in finance, sorry. Your team, you have to feel connected where you are. And and the thing is, these are our most productive waking hours when we're not with our family and our loved ones, right? I'm at home for a significant amount of time, but I'm asleep. I'm here when I'm awake. So it's so important to have that right team. So people don't inner fight and they're really there for that purpose. We do need to have more of a conversation about the wine though after. I do want to know.
Chocolate.
Yes, and I like to partake in red wine often. Okay, how are we doing? Any questions?
They're just asking about the recording. being
Uh,
available.
Oh, yes, the recording will be available, if you come by and say hi to
We
us.
can pivot, we can
Yeah.
ask any questions.
I have one more.
Okay.
I like my questions. No, I'm just kidding. We can pivot. I'm fine pivoting. So, and I'm gonna go back to Madison. Madison, you're our hero right now. So, well, you all are. But what advice would you give your 20-something self? And that's, for me, that's a scary question.
I think it's important, when we finish our schooling, when we have that degree, we've paid all this money for it. That's what you're focused on. I'm an MBA, I'm a PhD, I'm a whatever the letters are, right? And I think a lot of people who come out of school, me too, I did the same thing, so that's why I'm giving myself this, which I would wish I had a long time ago. Don't focus on that, right? You're in the interview because they already know that you can do the job. They just want to know if you're a fit. Or you're in front of your client because they have already said, well, this company must be good enough to talk to. So don't focus on how great you are. Focus on the impact you can have, the value you can add to whatever their problem is, or whatever their company is, or whatever that job is. We tend to always focus on ourselves, because again, we've paid all this money, we've spent all this time, and we should, let everyone know how great we are. But they already think you're great. And quite frankly, it backfires, because if you start talking about how great you are, then they think, why are they talking about how great they are? Do they not believe they're that great? Or are they just kind of pumping themselves up? And maybe I should look more into that. So it actually backfires. And really, you should start talking about, how you can add value, how your experience and your skills and what you've learned can actually solve their problem, and focus on that, because you want to focus on them, not on you.
Okay. We are done with our questions, and we're coming to a close anyways. So this leaves us in a really great spot for people just to chime in. I'm gonna start with the digital audience really quick, just in case, because your back is to me and I can only see you on this owl. So what questions do we have there? If any? And you can think about it as we're waiting. Okay, what about our in-person audience? Okay, there we go.
So we talked about differentiators, so how do you find them in like a workplace and even in this one? How do you go about that?
So the question is, how do you find out what your differentiator is, whether it's yourself or your company or a company? By figuring out who else is doing the same thing. So in a company, again, the wine industry, like, what are the other wineries doing? What are they not doing? What could you be doing as a company better than what they're doing? So it may not be that you're doing something completely new or completely different. Like I said, the winery I was talking with, they were actually doing something completely new, so it was an anomaly. It could be that, this one ingredient, like KFC, like there's fried chicken. How many fried chickens are there in the world? But KFC has this ingredient that differentiates them from everything else, right? So it could be something as small as an ingredient for a company. It could be how you do it. It could be, it could be that you do the same thing as far as delivering the product, but how you do it, what your customer service is like compared to everyone else. Think of healthcare system, right? It's changed a lot, but healthcare, they didn't really spend a lot of time thinking about bedside manner or how the patient felt, or they just want to get in, talk about something that's like, just let me tell you how great I am. I'm such an awesome surgeon, and just shut up and whatever. That's changed a lot. So some of the new healthcare companies that entered the market were really focused on the customer care. That's what their differentiator was, because they still had great doctors too. They just did it in a different way. So that's company wise, and same thing with yourself. Again, that's where figuring out what your differentiator is yourself. You have to think about everything you've done, all the things that and not just professionally, but what are you great at? Like maybe you're a really great writer, or maybe you're a really great puzzle solver, like you like jigsaw puzzles and you're really great at that. That's a thing, right? So add that to the list of what you're great at and what maybe differentiates you from someone else. If you love eating food, who doesn't love eating food? If you love eating food and you're a great writer, and that's what you love to do, and you love travel, you know, those are 3 data points. Well, maybe I'll go be a food critic, a world traveling food critic, right? So the differentiator is really all the things that make up who you are. Even way back when you were a kid that you didn't think made a difference, like mine. Like my mother always, you know, would shut down all my entrepreneurial stuff. I thought that was bad. So I didn't dip into that until 30 years later and realized that that was a good thing. And that was something that differentiated me, because my differentiator at that moment in time was I had this left brain and right brain way of thinking. And I didn't tap into both of those. Like, what can I do with that? What can I do with both creative and the practical side, the logical side? And so those are different ways you can think about how that differentiates you from everybody else or from most people, right? I mean, obviously it's hard to differentiate yourself when you have, you know, world populations today, but, you know, billions of people, but it's not only differentiating, but then also positioning yourself and leveraging that and branding yourself as that. Same thing with companies, branding yourself. That, like I said, this winery had a differentiator, but they weren't branding it that. They weren't marketing it.
So when you are transiting from one career to other career, how would you know that this would be better than like Indian or
So the question was how, if you change from one career to another or try to transition, how do you know that the next thing is better?
Yeah.
If you could figure that out, you'd be a billionaire.
Yeah.
You figure that question out on your own and
Yeah,
then let the rest of us know. The chart is for.
yeah,
You don't. I think it goes back to, that's why I go back to the driver, personal driver. I think it's better if you can match your driver with what that next thing is, and you can match what you're really great at with that next thing. You bring those 2 things together, because that'll feed you. You know what you said. If you're spending all your waking hours, doing what you love doing, it's feeding you constantly. Not about money, but just feeding your soul and feeding what you want to do. Sounds good to me, right? And there are people who will actually take less money in a job because it feeds these things. And there are people who take more money and they don't get fed these things and they're miserable. So, and you can do that, right? There's no right or wrong answer as long as you're purposeful about it. So you can say, you know what? I'm going to make a whole bunch of money the first 10 years of my career, and I'm going to hate what I'm doing. That's a choice, but don't make everyone else miserable in the meantime, right? That's your choice. You figure it out. Or you can say, you know, I'm not going to make that much money, but I'm loving what I'm doing every day. I'm getting so satisfied. I know I could be making twice as much, but I'm not going to. So those are all things that, again, just don't make everyone, like I said, don't make everyone else miserable every time.
right. So what is the differentiator in our office? Y'all know? Yes, the chocolate. So I start,
Presentations have chocolate.
all presentations have chocolate, and it's funny because I'll tell my colleagues that, and they're like, what do you mean you have chocolate? And we just do. And so it makes it, so we have that purpose, right? Our office has that purpose of guiding and supporting all of you. But that it makes you smile when you have that chocolate, right? So I appreciate your time today. You know, it's been a long time coming. I apologize it didn't happen last year and last semester, but I think it was meant to be today. And then we'll definitely have to do this again.
And
But
like I said, if I don't know how we can get my information, but you can find me on LinkedIn.
we'll
And
see.
just look at my name. It's a pretty unique name. Because I'm the only Paul Young Zdunek on there. But feel free to reach out, connect with me. Happy to answer any questions along the way, even if there's something else.
And I will have mastered the last name, and names are very important to me. I'll have mastered it by the time we meet again. So any last moment questions today? Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, this has been wonderful. So I think we can probably, we're gonna stop recording. Thank you, Digital